Welcome back to Docket 360. I'm your host, D. And before I get into the stories, I just want to point out a really cool Facebook group that I'm a member of. Bunch of cool people. Moderators are awesome. It's called Real Ghost Videos and Demons. Go check it out. Now, here is the first story. Enjoy. My father, mother, and I make frequent trips to the Smoky Mountains and stay in the cabins they have near Pigeon Forge. However, this particular trip still haunts me to this day. About 8 years ago, we stayed in a cabin that had an alarm system. It was already dark outside when we reached the cabin and got settled in. We set the alarm and thought we should watch a movie together. While we were watching the movie, the security alarm went off. The alarm was only to go off if an exterior door had been opened. We checked the cabin top to bottom to find nothing out of the ordinary. The next morning we called the company that rented the cabin to us to have them check out the alarm system. Someone came and checked out the system and said that he has been called out to this cabin multiple times within the last month with the same problem. Since it was only our first day at the cabin, I was already starting to feel a little creeped out. I noticed that there was a book on the table that guests could sign and talk about how much they loved the cabin. As I was reading more and more stories, I noticed that many of them mentioned feelings of being unsafe. Some even mentioned that they had found wet footprints on the deck where the hot tub was. I told my family about these stories and they told me they were all just trying to tell scary stories to get other guests spooked. I agreed with them and went on about our day. The same night, we go to bed like normal. My father slept in the basement of the cabin. I slept on the main floor beside the kitchen, and my mother slept on the top floor. My dad snored so loud that we all slept far away from each other, including my mom. It was about 2 a.m. in the morning when I woke up with the fridge door closing. I looked at the bright light from the fridge that was pouring into my room from the crack underneath the closed door. I noticed that the light would come and go as the fridge door seemed to continue to open and close. I assumed it was one of my parents leaning on the fridge door trying to decide what they wanted to eat for our late night snack. However, I felt weird. Didn't even consider to get out of bed to join in on the snack. The fridge light disappeared slowly and I heard footsteps walk away from my bedroom and head into the direction that goes up to my mom's room. The footsteps seemed to stop for a second, then start to trip upstairs. And out of nowhere they stopped. I assumed that it was my mother, and she made it to her room, so I fell back asleep. The next morning I wake up and go directly to my mom and ask what she decided to eat last night. She looked at me and asked what. I told her that I thought she was at the fridge last night opening and closing the fridge because I heard her go back upstairs after a while around 2 a.m. She looked at me and said, "I thought that was you." At this time in my life, I was known to sleepwalk every now and then. "I saw you standing at the top of the stairs last night around that time. I assumed you were sleepwalking because you looked at me and went back downstairs." So at this point I started to freak out and became sick to my stomach. For the rest of the trip, I slept with my mother on the very top floor. I didn't experience anything else the rest of the trip and never went anywhere alone. A couple of months go by after our trip when my dad tells me he was looking to rent another cabin for a trip. He went to go look at the cabin that we rented the last time and found out that the cabin had been closed and is no longer available to rent. Out of curiosity, he did some research to find out that many guests experienced something in that cabin. The complaints ranged from feeling unsafe, to people thinking someone was in the cabin that shouldn't have been there, to people leaving before their vacation was over. I'm not sure what my mother and I experienced that night at the cabin, but I know now that we aren't the only ones that went through something similar. The year was 1999, and I was 8 years old. I remember this because it was the same year that annoying, yet hypnotically catchy song I'm Blue came out. My mom was really big into Disney Channel, and so the TV was almost always turned on to it, and that song would play constantly, it seemed. Anyway, it was a sleepy Saturday morning in my rural hometown, and we were just starting out our day. My mom was beginning to start making lunch. We all slept late, while my brother and myself sat in front of the TV watching a cartoon. Everything was mundane, but as we all know, the mundane can change in an instant. And on this particular morning, that is exactly what was about to happen. The cartoon cut to commercial, and after a few, that stupid song came on as always. At the time, I didn't care because I liked it. I began singing along as I got up to use the restroom. Our home at the time was a small 3-bedroom trailer we called a cracker box. My brother and I shared a room at one end of the trailer, and past the living room, kitchen, and down a confined hallway at the furthest end was my parents' room. To the left of my parents' room was the main bathroom, to which I was now heading. The hallway was always the darkest part of the trailer because it didn't have any functioning light fixtures. The only lights spilled in from the back door, which lay directly in front of the bathroom door on the opposite side of the hall. As I trotted down the hall, still singing the I'm Blue song quietly to myself, I never imagined what was about to happen to me. I certainly didn't know that it would change my outlook on the world and the way it was. I almost reached the end of the hall. My parents typically kept their door open to their bedroom, which on this day would lead to my undoing. I was now in front of the bathroom door when directly in front of me something suddenly appeared from behind my parents' bedroom wall. It was a human skull, picked clean of any flesh or tissue, as if it had been surgically removed and scrubbed clean to be displayed at a museum. Its lower jaw was somehow still attached, though having no muscle or sinew to hold it in place. The eye sockets were deep, completely pitch black through the skull, and a considerable amount of light could be seen casting through it behind the door. What was more strange was that completely encircling its head was what can only be described as a tan and untamed lion's mane, wildly sticking in all directions. It had no body, and yet was eye level with me, like it was suspended in midair. In complete silence, it bobbed its head up and down as if it enjoyed what I was singing. To this day, I do not understand why, but I felt like it was smiling at me as it did so. Needless to say, I screamed and ran back down the hall and into the kitchen, immediately grabbing my mom's waist. She panicked, quickly abandoned her cookie, and dropped to her knees to check on her terrified son. In her words, she said I was 3 shades of white, which in Texas means you're paler than pale could be. Through stuttering breaths and tears, I recounted the terrifying ordeal with her in great detail. My mom froze for a moment when I described it having a poofy mane. Then, with a look of absolute seriousness, she told me that she's seen them too. This statement was more than enough to take me back a little bit. She's seen them too? Now I was truly mortified, yet strangely relieved because I knew this wasn't just a figment of my young imagination. My own mother had been experiencing the same thing. She explained later that she had been seeing what she called fur balls rolling around the house. 2 of them specifically, a black one and a tan one. She said she never saw their faces though. I guess I just had the displeasure of being the first out of the 2 of us to see it. Now at the time we had at least 1 dog, maybe 2, I can't recall. But my mom was 100% certain she wasn't seeing the dogs running around the house. She specifically said they rolled around the house. She explained that they were demons. And she said she wasn't sure why they were hanging around our trailer, but that we needed to find out. In a couple of weeks preceding this event, I saw the furball demon just about every night, always in the same place, always staring at me with those vacant eyes. Every time I saw it, it was creepier than the last. I grew to hate having to go down the hall to use the restroom or take a bath. I would do whatever I could to avoid it, but I'd inevitably have to do so. Baths were notably the most terrible because I'd have to spend more time in the bathroom, all the while knowing that the demon could be lurking close by, ready to show its face to me again. My brother, however, saw an opportunity to scare the crap out of me, which he did multiple times. The last time I remember seeing it was indeed the worst. I was getting faced with needing to go down the hall to the bathroom. This time it was nearly pitch black in the hallway, with only the moonlight creeping in through the back door to illuminate a sliver of the narrow space. My steps had grown increasingly slow with each sighting of this nightmarish creature lurking in the dark, so the walk down the hallway felt like an eternity. I never knew when I would see it, but I was certain I would. I kept my head down most of the way through the hall, but knew I'd eventually have to look up, if even just to find the bathroom light switch. To make matters worse, I had an intense fear of the dark, and and yet now I felt as if I was forced to move slowly through my fear, unsure as to whether or not that thing was watching me. I don't remember why, whether I couldn't find the switch, or simply a burst of courageous curiosity, but I looked up, and there, once again, was the face of the demon, its empty eyes outlined by the glow of the moon. It stared at me motionless. Other than the outlined eyes, I couldn't tell whether it had its lower jaw or not. I couldn't tell if it was smiling at me like previous times. All I saw were the empty eyes. This lack of detail in the darkness intensified my fear. I was suddenly overwhelmed with a sinister feeling like this thing could hurt me or even kill me. Whatever it was, it wanted me scared. It enjoyed me being terrified. It hated me so much that I could easily imagine it laughing at me as I ran away screaming. Whatever this thing was, I knew it was evil. And now, as I recount this event 18 years later, I begin to wonder if the last one I saw was really the black one. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. Don't forget to share it with your friends. And if you guys have some content that you would like to see as part of one of my videos, please go ahead and send it over to docket360@gmail.com, or you can send me a direct message over on Twitter @docket360. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good night.